And yet,
Still
many
not in
people.
charge of the
So
system.
who's in
I
charge of
asked
the
you a
system,
simple
Ted?
question, sir.
Wanda Sykes said when Barack Obama got elected, "How are you going to complain about the man when you are the man?" Now, from the president to the attorney general to the state attorney to the mayor to the head of the police department to the commissions of the schools in the city and in the county to the majority of city council in that city, all of them are black. And you're still saying that we don't run anything?
So who's in charge of the
No, no,
system,
no.
Ted?
I said who created the system. I didn't say we didn't run anything. I challenged a lot of those black leaders, by the way. I said when we talk about the system, what black people have been in charge of any system. I'm not talking about a position. I'm not talking about a mayor. You know good
So
and well what I'm talking
you're
about,
basically
Mr.
saying
Elder.
that they're black faces that are still in those
Correct.
positions, but they're still being a
Correct.
part of the
Similar to
system.
you, Mr. Elder. You're
so-
a black face in a position in the conservative movement. They're just the same. They're just on the other side.
This lady is dumber than a box of rocks. Yeah. And she is going against the God that is Larry Elder. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. We're going to take a look at this professional race hustler and see how Larry Elder destroys her. Let's take a look.
Martin Luther King in 1966, Charlemagne, gave an interview to the BBC. This is 2 years after the Civil Rights Act of '64 got passed. And he said, "I'm amazed at how many positive changes there have been in America in the last 2 years. Why, if things keep going like this, we could have a black president in about 40 years' time." Mm-hmm. Do the math. Right on cue, Barack Obama elected 2008. He didn't say there'll be a black female president of Harvard, and there has been. He didn't say there are going to be black CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, and there have been several. He didn't say the percentage of the House would equal the percentage of black people in the population, and it does. He didn't say the 3 largest cities would have black mayors, and they do. He didn't say the largest and most prestigious organization of doctors, the American Medical Association, would have 2 black presidents, and there have been. He didn't say the most prestigious organization of lawyers, the American Bar Association, would have 2 black presidents, and they have. He said president, meaning at that point, I can feel that I've reached the mountaintop, which is the speech he gave right before he got assassinated the day before.
Everybody, I'm in dire straits. If you want me to survive, you need to like, comment, subscribe, and share. Otherwise, I'm going to die a slow death. Thanks.
And now we act as if Barack Obama never even got elected. And we're still talking about systemic racism. It's not fair. It's wrong. And you're discouraging black people from working hard. 1990.
Okay. Mr. Elder, a quick question. Let's just remove the word racism, since that seems to be a word that triggers, a conversation down the water hole. Let's just focus on the word system.
Okay.
You mentioned that the system was the one that discouraged. And again, get to the question. So the question is, you said that the system encouraged black women to be single mothers, correct?
I said the welfare state, yes.
The welfare, the system. So who's in
Okay.
charge of the system? Who was in charge of the system?
Well, it was Democrats that passed it.
And who were Democrats? Were they black or white at that time?
Well, at the time, majority of black people were Democrats, as the majority of black people are Democrats now.
Not the voters. I'm talking about the system. Remember, the main idea is the word system. Who was in charge of the system at the time? The Democrats at the time, the system. I'm just going to Charlemagne's point about white or black. Was it white Democrats in charge of the system or black Democrats in charge of the system?
Well, if you're prepared to say that Lyndon Johnson did this viciously with an intent to destroy the black family, I disagree. He did it with the best of intentions.
I didn't ask you that.
And if you look at the New York Times, which is left wing, the Washington Post, which is left wing, they cheered all of this.
Right. And what I'm asking, was it white people? So I'm going to ask again in case my mic's not coming through clearly. Was it white people in charge of the system or black people in charge of that system that helped break down the black family? It's a simple yes, just a simple question, white or black?
Well, you didn't have to go on welfare unless you voluntarily chose to go on welfare. The inducement was put there by Democrats, by the left.
Correct. Okay. Democrats,
most black people were Democrats, and they voted for these white people
not
too.
Voters. I said who's in charge of the system.
System. She says system like 50 million times. It's really annoying. Why is she doing this? It's so weird. She is trying to nail down Larry Elder to admit that systems exist. In her mind, she believes that if she can make Larry Elder admit that systems exist, then systemic racism exists, which is a complete and utter non sequitur. Yes, lady, systems exist. that does not prove that today in 2023, the plight of the African American community can be blamed on systemic racism. And what's even funnier, in the first clip that I showed you, he basically outlines how African Americans control major cities across the United States. So how the heck can you blame systemic racism on the poverty in the African American inner city, on systemic racism, when Black people are running everything? And she goes on and on and on and on and on. It doesn't matter how many times Larry Elder outlines people running the system who are Black, that doesn't count, because they didn't make the system. If they didn't make the system, then there's some other nefarious force behind the scenes that's controlling everything.
See, the FBI says.
Well, I just told you, if it's systemic racism, please explain to me how it was when America really had systemic racism in 1940. 87% of Blacks lived under the poverty line. Again, this is during Jim Crow era. My father is from Athens, Georgia, grew up in Jim Crow. My mom is from Huntsville, Alabama, grew up in Jim Crow. 87% of Blacks live below the poverty line. This is before Brown versus Board of Education. You did not find these kind of black on black crime.
Probably because we had no
But
choice
they still were living
ourselves.
below the poverty line, though, sir.
I'm sorry?
You're forgetting the fact that they were still living below the poverty line. You're picking and choosing, saying this was good, but this was bad.
Okay.
The bottom line, they end between the poverty line. But let's move forward on
Well,
system.
can I just address that? In 1940, 87% of Blacks lived under the poverty line. 1960, that number had fallen to 47%. That's a 40-point drop in 20 years. That's the greatest 20-year period of economic expansion for Black people in the history of America. Again, well before Brown versus Board of Education, well before the KKK imploded, well before we had race-based preferences. Why? Because it was rare for a Black kid to be raised in a family without a father in the home, a strong belief in Judeo-Christian values, a belief in patriotism, even as America wasn't applying these values to Black people, obviously, and a belief in entrepreneurship. All those things are now under assault by organizations like Black Lives Matter, Charlotte.
Larry Elder just crushed her. And this lady doesn't even know what's happening to her. She doesn't understand what is going on. She promotes systemic racism, that systemic racism is the reason for everything. So Larry Elder points out something very, very important, that Black Americans were moving out of poverty during the worst time in America, other than slavery, of systemic racism, actual systemic racism. And she jumps in and says, well, yeah, but you got to highlight that we were in poverty back then. Lady, in the 60s, most people were in poverty. I mean, my goodness, it was, 40% of Blacks were in poverty, but I think something like 30% of whites were in poverty back then. Everybody was in poverty back then. That was before the 80s. Hello. And she is too dumb to realize that she just got completely destroyed.
We've had race riots, but so have Japanese.
So you do agree that there's racism? I'm just so confused. Mr. Elder,
I never even came close to saying. I never came close to saying there was no racism.
You just saying you don't think it's systemic racism.
Not anymore. Obviously, there was. We had something called slavery. We had something called Jim Crow.
That destroyed Black. Hold on, sir. That was the system that destroyed Black Wall Street. It's the same system right now that's not even wanting to pay those same living descendants, because I know your position on reparations, but those same living descendants of Black Wall Street.
Okay.
And then you go on to say that the system, the quote unquote system, is also trying to destroy President Trump. So I'm just so confused on, do you believe that the system can destroy or not? You pick and choose, sir, and that's what's so confusing to me.
So here we go. She's got him because he admitted that a system is doing something. Oh, okay. So if you admit that there are systems in the world that can destroy, then you're admitting that systemic racism exists? This lady is an idiot. This lady is seriously an idiot. She's trying to pin him on the fact that he doesn't believe that Donald Trump has committed crimes and the system is going after him. The system meaning the United States government. So if Larry Elder admits that the system's going after Donald Trump, then she thinks she's scored some political points, and Larry Elder is admitting that there's systemic racism?
Even the head of Urban League, a black man, once said that if you have poor credit score, you're not going to get a loan. End of statement.
Sir,
yes.
let's just, okay. When you were talking about crime, you weren't prepared to talk about disproportion. You talked about how it was more black people that was doing it, and then you talked about how we're the smaller, of the population. The same applies also to the loans. It's more white people than it is black people. You seem to pick and choose.
I'm talking about the rate. I'm talking about the rate.
Whatever it is, the bottom line is it's more white people than it is black people. And so if more black people are not getting loans disproportionately, it seems you only want to apply the disproportion to the conversation when it benefits your talking point.
I'm not sure you understood.
Which is why they say.
I'm not sure you understood.
No, I understood.
I'm not sure you understood my point. That's why I mentioned in 1995 when 186 black people who were not getting loans filed a class action lawsuit claiming that they were denied the loan because of racism. Citicorp said, okay, here are your loans. The reason I wasn't giving you the loans is because we're afraid you weren't going to be able to pay them back.
I'm not talking about
Fast forward,
sir.
they weren't able to pay them back, which proved the Citicorp point.
I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about
I know
that.
you're not, because inconvenient.
I'm talking about your response to Envy when you said more white people get approved for loans.
She doesn't understand what rate means. Rate is proportional to the population. Wow.
Because some people commit crimes.
No, sir. Stop. My apologies for interrupting you earlier. I just couldn't stomach the answer that I knew you were going to say.
Couldn't stomach the answer?
Yeah, I couldn't stomach because your actual answer to Trump being what was happening to him with the indictments, you actually said that the system was doing it. You said there was a two-tier system. This is right. Your words.
That's right.
That it was a two-tier system. So when it came to Trump, all of a sudden you now believe in this systematic thing that's happening to Trump. But then when it happens to black people,
but it's not about race. It's not about race.
I didn't ask you that. I asked you. Remember, I made it easy for you, and I took race out of it. Remember, I said I'm just talking about the system.
Listening to this lady is a little bit like banging your head against the wall over and over and over again.
That all of a sudden the governor is accused of somehow defending slavery. He's not doing anything of the sort.
What did you think about that?
Well, sir, you were actually one that defended slavery. In your comments, you said that, like it or not, slavery was legal in response to reparations. So it's you that was defending slavery, correct?
Defending it and saying that it's illegal are two very different things. Slavery, unfortunately.
That was your response. That was your response into if reparations should happen. So your response to that was, like it or not, slavery was legal, and one would think that was a defense on those who were asking.
Well, you would think it was a defense, but it is not a defense. Unfortunately, slavery has been part and parcel of human history from the very beginning. Asians enslaved Asians, whites enslaved whites, blacks enslaved blacks, Native Americans enslaved Native Americans. This is a culture, the Western civilization, that had a revulsion against it. We had a civil war against it. And we ought to applaud ourselves for doing something about this. This is a flawed country. It's moving forward. It's becoming more perfect all the time. Today, if you are born and raised in America, if you finish high school, presumably one where you can read, write, and computer grade level, which is why I support school choice, don't have a kid before you're 20, get married first, get a job, keep a job, don't quit it until you get another job, and avoid the criminal justice system, you will not be poor.
If you're not so smart, it's sometimes not good to announce it to millions and millions of people. Larry Elder just destroyed her in like 2 seconds. She trots out and tries to say that he defended slavery. Really? Saying that something has existed since the beginning of time, which slavery has, saying that slavery was legal in the United States, which it was legal pretty much everywhere over the entire world, is not defending slavery. And he basically takes her out and says, you are just dumb. You're just stupid. Blaming the United States for slavery is like blaming a bird because the sky is blue. It's just the way of the world. And America has moved forward over and over and over again. And Larry Elder just points out how far we have come. And blaming the United States after we fought a civil war it's just dumb. These race hustlers need to have racism. If racism doesn't exist, they won't have a job.
slave trade. And by the way, the Arab slave trade was even worse than the European slave trade. 90% rate of attrition, often making men and women walk on barefoot across the Sahara, and the men were castrated. Only about
Okay,
five.
so if they go after the money from the other countries, then would you agree that it would be okay to go after the money from America? Is that your problem with it?
When are you going to stop with this? Everybody has
No,
a
I just
grievance.
asked a simple question.
I'm answering your question. There's no end. There'll be no end to this because slavery has been part of human history from the very beginning.
Okay,
We're getting money.
I've let you talk, sir. I've let you talk. And every time I talk, you begin to talk and then you say, let you finish. So I asked you a very simple question. You said, if you're going to go after it in America, go after it in Africa. So if we all agree to go after it in Africa, will you then agree to go after it in America? It's just a simple question. Yes or no?
No, I won't because it's a waste of time. We ought to be spending our time on education.
Next question.
Okay, you told me that.
So at this point, I was kind of like, is she either not listening to him or is she that dumb? Larry Elder, just before this, I have to cut it up because it's the Breakfast Club. Just before this said, slavery has always been around. If you're going to go after reparations, you'd have to go after everybody because everybody was enslaved at one point. And she narrows in down to this one point, which says, okay, if we go after the people in Africa to get reparations, would you support it in the United States? So she completely and utterly either missed his point that slavery has been around forever. So you'd have to get reparations from literally everybody in the entire world. So there's no point in reparations. So literally, comment below, is she that dumb? Or does she not listen to what he's saying? I am really not sure at this point.
A recall vote, and there was one, as there was in 2003. We recalled the governor then, and there was in 2021 when I attempted to recall Gavin Newsom. That's part of our democratic process in California.
Absolutely. We agree with that. I'm going to your statement when you said rather than moan about it a little while ago, you said rather than moan about it, I'm just going to keep doing the hard work. And so I'm just saying that technically is moaning about it because the governor's the that's my point, sir.
I don't follow exactly what you're saying. I really don't.
It's okay. I didn't expect you to.
Yeah,
but
I'm a little slow sometimes.
One moment, yeah, we get it.
Yeah.
One moment you're complaining about the system, and the next minute you're saying the system is fair. The next minute you're saying it's not fair. So that's what I'm saying. There just seems to be a double standard on you and the system, not wanting to be accountable for a system that Black people are not in charge of, by the way, of not wanting to hold both sides accountable when it comes to the system.
Do I believe Hillary was treated differently and Joe Biden treated differently than Donald Trump is being treated? Yes, I do. Is that an indictment about whether or not America is systemically racist? No, it is not. Those are
they're two totally different things.
Yes,
you're
they
trying
are.
to merge the two, but they're two totally different things.
I agree with you.
Okay, this is the craziest thing ever. So at the end of everything, after the system, she agrees with Larry Elder at the end. Did you catch that? It went very, very fast. For this entire interview, she's been trying to nail down Larry Elder to admit that there is a system, that there are systems out there that can hold someone down or create problems in the world. And she believes that if Larry Elder says that there is such a thing as systems in the world, which is really stupid, but if he admits it, then he has to admit that there is systemic racism. But then at the end here, he's like, yes, the system is going after Donald Trump, but no, that is not systemic racism. And she's like, well, those are two completely different things. That's exactly what Larry Elder has been trying to say to you, you stupid individual. Okay, we're going to end it off here with the most wonderful moment I have ever seen on YouTube. Larry Elder goes after Charlemagne and destroys him.
I know you probably got to go. Have you ever heard of the term wake-up call?
No.
It is an incident where a person of color forgets that they are of color and are reminded rather brutally by an unexpected act of racism. Have you ever had any of those?
Oh, brother.
I'm just asking. You think you've ever
Well,
had
I'm acutely aware, Charlemagne, that I'm a black person, just as you are a black person. And when Joe Biden insulted you by saying, you ain't really black, we don't know whether or not you want to vote for me or vote for Donald Trump, it seems to me that should have been a wake-up call on your part. How dare this guy come in here and insult you, a black man, and tell you you got to think a certain kind of way? I'm amazed that you weren't mad about that.
I'm not gonna say it upset me, just like I'm not letting you upset me. You know what I mean? I don't tend to get upset over things like
Well,
that. But what I did say,
well,
to him
you
was,
just not
it's
talk about wake up call, and it seemed to me that should have been a wake up call on your part.
Boom. Mic drop. That's it. Yes, Charlemagne. Wasn't that a wake-up call for you? Why weren't you offended by Joe Biden? We know you voted for him. You guys keep saying you're independents. That's a bunch of BS. You're not independents. You're Democrats. And you will vote Democrat no matter what the Democratic Party does to you. Because you can blame systemic racism and not the Democratic Party, who has been running all of the inner cities for 70, 80 years. So why weren't you offended? If Joe Biden would have been sitting in front of me and says, if you don't vote for me, then you're not a woman, I would have been offended. But you weren't. Mic drop. Thanks, guys. This was a long one. Sorry about that. We will see you on the next one.